Hello, thank you everyone for joining us for this panel. I'm Nicole Miller, I'm the Managing Director at Biomimicry 3.8, and I'm so thrilled and honored to be with this panel of brilliant women. We have scientists, biologists, designer, farmer. I mean, we've got an eclectic group here of amazing women. So to kind of start us off, I'd love each of you to kind of give us the 2-minute spiel of who you are and maybe why you're here.
My name's Ellie. I am a scientist and designer and the farmer that Nicole just mentioned. I am here to talk about how we can learn from some of the more systemic lessons that nature has to teach us. Some of the more ambiguous and unusual things. I'm working with the Biomimicry Institute with Janine and Nicole. And on a project to completely redesign the fashion industry, learning from how materials cycle in nature and how we can learn from the highest level of natural systems.
I'm Gautami Veerakun, a lichenologist, botanist and ecologist from the Natural History Museum, London. So I look after a massive lichen collection at the museum that is 500,000. And we use our historic collections and recent collections to do many different types of research. So at the moment I'm focusing at Himalayan mountains and the forest ecosystems there to understand what we are doing at the moment and how much nitrogen pollution is happening there and what is going to happen in the future using lichens as bioindicators.
And I'm Janine Benyus. I'm a natural history writer who 20 years ago or whatever wrote a book called Biomimicry about innovation inspired by nature and then went on a magic carpet ride. Helped found Biomimicry 3.8, where Nicole's our managing director. It's a consultancy. The Biomimicry Institute, which is a nonprofit. And then we have a center for biomimicry at Arizona State University. But my favorite role is biologist at the design table, helping people who make our world learn from the masters.
Cool. Hey guys, I'm Lauren. I'm just a really curious person, so I do have an education, but mostly I'm just curious, and I really love to explore worlds beyond what the human can see. So all those worlds beyond our eyes, ears, nose, mouth, senses. There's a whole wealth of stuff there that we as humans can't currently access. And I use my skill set, which is chemistry, design, materials, to explore those worlds and try and bring them into our world so we can understand them. So everything from visualizing pollution. This was a jacket that I created in a compound 12 years ago, which absorbs air pollution and changes color to let you know how much carbon emission you've been absorbed to each day. And I was only a teenager when I did that, so sort of doing that I didn't realize the impact that it could have, but I did realize that such a complex message in facts and figures could be communicated so simply through a language of color to anyone. And that took me on my journey 12 years later to exploring lots of unseen things.
Amazing. So, as you can see, no shortage of topics to talk about with these ladies. But let's talk about nature-inspired design, and let's start there. Nature has been influencing designers for hundreds of years. Talk about what you think is different today and what we've learned from the past and how we can kind of apply that to some of the problems that we're solving today. And any one of these, feel free.
My opinion on it is, and I'm not probably the most qualified person to speak about this, but it's just a case of observation, and I think technology has allowed us to observe deeper today, so we can look at everything from a micro cell to an exoplanet, and when we open up those worlds, of course we see the world in a different way. So I teach at different colleges, and I asked my students a while ago to draw a tree, and everyone Googled a tree, so I failed them all, because I was like, no, go outside and actually draw a tree. And I think that's a really interesting observation of how we design today and how we then think about systems. On the one hand, we have people researching on such a microscopic and macroscopic level and getting really into how we design, and others that are not even touching it. So I think there's a whole spectrum. and that falls out in many different ways, and I'm sure.
So as a scientist, actually, we use nature's creation, so nature's own designs, to understand the nature of nature. So nature has created so many things from the beginning of this planet. So what we are doing, how we are doing, where we are standing, so we have to use some of these nature's creations to understand the current situation and what is going to happen in the future. So that is where I am fitting in. So we also look at in microscopic level and macroscopic level, and also environmental level and ecological aspects of the nature's creations. Compare our experiences with the past and what is happening at the present and what is going to happen in the future, and how adversely these effects are going to affect us human beings and other fauna and flora on the planet. Mm-hmm. So that is our role.
And I think we're also moving beyond the nature that we can see to the elements of nature that are unseen. And I don't just mean the very small things, I mean the things that aren't tangible, the relationships between things, the signaling, the way, for example, decisions are made in nature. Nature has, as we've talked about before on this stage, billions of years of experience building things, but it also has billions of years deciding what to build, of experience deciding what to build, and how those choices are made, unconscious choices, because obviously there's no intent there, but it still manages to be very, very good at choosing between different options.
So those patterns.
Patterns.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
There are much, oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to ask, I mean, Janine, you've been studying this field for a long time. Like, what have you seen, just even in the last 20, 30 years?
Yeah, even since the field started. I think, you know, when I was first starting to talk about biomimicry, there was a real pushback from people in biomimetics in academia, and they were saying, this is not about sustainability, period. It's just, that's being too subjective. You know, we're just like Da Vinci. We're just learning, you know, we're learning how things fly, and we don't really care whether they fly efficiently or elegantly, right? So there was like a, you know, and I found that very, very strange for that to be that kind of an objection. So in other words, to be sustainable back then was to be suspect in your scientific objectivity. Wow, now that's changed. And now I think as we ask different things of our designs, we're asking more and more of our designs each year, right? To the point now we're asking, are our designs contributing to social justice, right? Are they, and it's not just energy and water, and it's, do they increase biodiversity, the chances for biodiversity? I mean, that as we do that evolutionary thing where we ask more of our designs, we're turning to ask different questions in biomimicry that have to do with, you know, shaving materials and reducing toxins and having things work as a full system, you know, in life cycle to actually contribute to the places they are. These are all questions that were not asked when it was simply an engineering field.
And I'm wondering if anyone feels comfortable speaking to this. Like, I mean, even since I came into the practice 10 years ago, I feel like it went from being something like woo-woo and esoteric to like, now it's like a tangible tool, you know, that people use. Like, have you all experienced that in terms of, you know, Lauren, when you introduced your idea, were people like, this is crazy, this is not real? Like,
yeah. And people still are.
Sure.
But I think, like, with that jacket, for example, if you put that jacket on and you go behind a bus and it changes colour, you can't argue, right? So
yeah.
I think there's an honesty in how we can design to create, not an honesty, but a kind of show and tell of just letting people connect and understand. Like, if I give you your facts and figures, you're going to feel bad, but you might not necessarily make an emotional connection to it. But literally, if I put you in that jacket, you're going to see it, and then there's no hiding. And I think, I don't know, as a woman in this field, and particularly with how I dress and how I kind of conduct my own personal life, it can get esoteric and it can get a little bit shoved off as not important. but it is important you literally can't lie with, you can't argue with the data, right? So if you visualize that data in a really kind of, what's the right word, like connecting way, then hopefully you'll impact more people, and then people will actually start to listen beyond the facts and figures, which can be a bit alienating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the field itself has a few years under its belt now. It's got some stuff to show. It's got some demonstrations, and over time, those biomimetic designs have proven themselves to often be more effective and more efficient than what they were replacing or are developments from. And so, as you progress from a great idea to a tangible, demonstrated object or system, it's very hard for people to dismiss the real numbers showing that this works.
I agree with that, because nature never lies. So things that we take examples from the nature, so I use lichens here. So the figures that they are really showing, so that it is high time that politicians, managers, conservationists, ecologists get together to change this system. So because the facts and figures that we are collecting in our everyday research life from these vulnerable ecosystems, especially that Himalayan mountain region where I'm working. So that is one of the coolest places in the world. So the things that have established over a million years, they don't lie to us. They show actual figures to us. So some are actually really critical, some don't like to accept, especially policymakers and politicians. They are blind to that. They want to keep like they are deaf to them, but we can't. So time has come. We have crossed the line now. So these facts and figures what we are collecting, so population is increasing, we have to feed the population. So how we manage and use our system to answer these questions, to solve these matters a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So nature never lies. So like your quote, that is a creation. So like this bird nest. So if we collapse these things, that whole of this ecosystem is going to collapse. And we are part of that. You and I are part of that. So I think that nature's facts and figures we can't ignore anymore.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, go.
The humility, I think, our humility. Our arrogance has gone down. Our humility has gone up as we've, faced what's happening with us, and with that, we become more and more admiring of how the natural world, and realizing how the natural world has managed for 3.8 billion years to always make of this place an Eden. Always, that people know that. You don't need to have a scientific training to realize, right? And I think it's now I think that's in the vernacular now. You're right, nature doesn't lie, and the fact that it's so competent when you go out into the natural world is now, there's an obvious contrast.
Mm-hmm. So that if I add to Janae, so that that throughout this week, throughout this COP26, we are talking about net zero. So to achieve net zero, that main focus is, yes, on carbon, but we can't forget that there are other factors and other, as an example, if I talk about nitrogen pollution, which I'm looking at. So nitrous oxide, this greenhouse gas, the effect of this greenhouse gas is like a hidden elephant in your room, back of your room, which you have not seen so far. So the effect from the nitrogen oxide in the coming 100 years is 265 times to 298 times than carbon itself.
Okay. Yep.
So every year that we human beings add 6.5% of more nitrogen into our own atmosphere. although the nitrogen has been an unreactive gas over 3 million years, now we have disturbed that cycle. We have been disturbing because that growing population need more food, so we need more synthetic fertilizers to feed the soil, so we have to face the consequences. So that is why I say that nature never lies.
And I think building on that, what Gautami said about the nitrogen cycle being a cycle is so important. The same with carbon. These are cycles. They're not net zero is it's almost a ridiculous concept. Nature doesn't have a level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that is the goal. It's constantly in flux. It's constantly cycling. And you know what humans will do because we do it all the time. We're going to overshoot. The problem in 150 years or 200 years, hopefully sooner, will be that there's not enough carbon dioxide because we've overcompensated. So we need to stop thinking about specific levels and start thinking about cycles and flux. And we need to start having those conversations today. Otherwise, in 150 years' time, we're going to be starting from scratch and it's going to be too difficult to change the way people think, which is that we should be targeting this one number. Which, bringing it back to Nicole's original question, I think biomimicry's journey is very similar to the journey of sustainability in general, in that it was dismissed and then gradually it gained traction because it was shown to be real and meaningful and to work, and gradually it gains acceptance and becomes mainstream. We have to listen to the people on the margins of society because they are the canaries in the coal mine. They are raising the red flags. And sometimes what they say is very easy to dismiss because maybe it's not based on science or it's not based on evidence. But if you think about people like James Lovelock, who was dismissed for his Gaia theory and originally as being hippie nonsense, now it makes a lot, now we understand. And there's often that little kernel of truth in what people say that when you really listen to it, is very important and needs to be taken on board.
I was going to say, I mean, I was also, as you were speaking, I was thinking of James Lovelock and particularly the Novacene, his most recent published book, and how he talks about balance and how that Gaia will regulate if we just allow it. And there's an amazing paragraph about the world heating up, but imagine if the planet grew more flowers that were black or white that could reflect and deflect, and actually if we give nature an opportunity to regulate and to balance, she will. But we just have to give that opportunity.
It's amazing how quickly nature bounces back when humans take their hands off the scale.
Yeah, I think we saw that during COVID. There was numerous examples of that happening. And one thing I want to talk about is this. I mean, we're here at COP. We're here talking about big problems and how we're going to move forward and solve them. And part of that is how we're talking about it, the communication and the signaling, right? And so, Lauren, your jacket, I mean, a beautiful example of signaling and, a very visceral example that you feel. Can you guys talk a little bit about, one, how nature does signaling? And then two, what do you think the signals that we need to advance the conversations that we need to have happen to kind of move the needle?
So that if I say that one good example, so many of us saw that some of our ocean scientists here on this podium, on this stage. So we know the corals are bleaching. That is one good example. So ocean is 2/3 of this world. So the corals are bleaching. So, and then at the same time, some of these beautiful, fascinating lichen ecosystems, they are bleaching. They lose their color, they lose their shapes. So these are actually the signals that we visually see as scientists. And then loss of biodiversity, this rapid increasing extinction rates, those are, I don't know how we have ignored these signals. And also adverse climatic effects, like droughts, forest fires, all are nature signals, that alarms that she is sending us to understand what is happening. So that is how I see it as a scientist, working with the environment every day.
And I think there's a huge problem with loss of connection to our environment. I mean, this is a lovely space, and it's been made lovely by literally bringing in plants. But they have to come in from outside, and they're not coming in from outside this building. They're coming in from outside this city, because there's so few opportunities to be in touch with nature and see those signs and see that degradation for ourselves.
Yeah, I think the signs are clearly there, right? Like, we see it in the bleaching of the corals. We see the trees changing colour throughout the seasons. They're all around us. But the problem isn't that nature's not showing us. The problem is that we are not understanding and we're not connecting to it. So if we can't, like, you know, if you have like a broken arm, right, you go to the doctors. But if we have like a chemical imbalance within our brain, we often ignore it. We don't even understand our own brains, let alone what's physically in front of us. So I think it starts with education from very early, and I think like we have to allow people to communicate with themselves, to understand themselves as an emotional inner being, to then understand the world that they live in. Like, we construct this reality from our brains, right? So we have to understand that as well, and we have to sort of show people that connection between inner and outer world, and then beyond world, which I'm not sure is taught at school or, you know, in a lot of areas.
Nature is a phenomenal teacher. I've had experiences where I've done STEM workshops with 9-year-olds, and you can teach them concepts like the difference between complicated and complexity, you know, really difficult mathematical concepts that people do PhDs and still don't understand. You show them a flock of starlings and they get it like that.
Yeah, yeah. It's a different way of communicating and accessing a body that is ultimately in front of us, showing us that it's dying.
I think our cellular knowledge will save us. I mean, I think we have a very thin veneer of a cultural evolution that's keeping us from listening to our own cries for help. I think that when you drink water that has chlorine in it, your cells are going, "Whew, this is wrong," because for millions of years, we've evolved to be able to be very careful about picking healthy landscapes to live in. When a landscape is sick, you can show people pictures of landscapes that have disease in them, and they know that they like that landscape better than that landscape. They don't know why, but we know cellularly. Getting back in touch with that.
Intuition as well.
Yeah, taking away that veneer and saying, let's talk about the way this water tastes. The other signaling thing you asked, what are we going to need? The natural world, while we've been taught that competition is what keeps ecosystems together or creates ecosystems, competition occurs in the natural world, but by far the larger context is cooperation. Symbiotic, you know, lichen are a perfect example of a very close symbiotic relationship. Partnership is actually the matrix in which competition occurs, but partnership runs the world, make no doubt about it. Very complex mutualistic guilds of species working together. And we've been looking at, because businesses are interested in this and communities are interested in this, like what makes partnerships? What are enduring partnerships? How does nature establish a mutualism between a fungus and a tree? How does it maintain that mutualism without cheating? How does it pass that mutualism on through generations? So there's all this etiquette that happens, and it has to do with signaling. So even at the chemical level, you know, a fungus that's going to give a tree phosphorus and a tree that's going to give the fungus carbon, they first have to meet underground in the root systems, the rhizosphere, and they're giving chemical signals to one another. And basically what they are is it's a trading of trust and reciprocity. And if somebody sort of breaks the contract, they move on, the tree will move on to another fungus, or the fungus will move on to another tree. There is signaling that has to do with, do you want to be a partner? Will you be a good partner? Will you stay with me? That's what we have to learn now. I mean, all of this deceptiveness, especially now with our trust being such a perishable object in the United States, and truth, I should say truth being such a perishable object. We have to get back to our signals blinking clear and true, because that's what makes the natural world go round. They can trust each other's signals.
So if I add to that a little bit more, Nick. So as a scientist, I never thought that I will have to work with some of the decision makers, especially politicians from different regions of the world. So beyond science, actually, that we have to walk ahead as storytellers to make them understand, so that use their language to make them understand. So what they need to do, that to connect with them actually, so and give them the correct signals, of course, that not just scientific facts and evidence and conclusions, give them the correct signals and translate these signals into their language to make them understand, to change the policies, change the things. And I think that COP26 is trying to do that. So to build trust, bring people to one place from all over the world. So success of us and signals that we emit from these conferences and meetings and gatherings, so are very, very important. Yeah. Important for nature, not only the signals from the nature, but the signals that we give out to the nature for making those decisions are so important today.
We have a saying in biomimicry about you have to match your signal to the antenna. So what you're talking about in terms of the storytelling, you know, what does the antenna out there need to hear, and matching that story to meet that in order for the message to be absorbed and activated.
Yeah, so that to find the nature-based solutions, actually, as David and Sandy discussed this morning at the beginning, to find nature-based solutions, how we emit the signals, that and how we transmit them.
Yeah.
Yes, correctly.
I want to shift a little bit because there's some expertise here that I feel the room could really glean a lot from, and that the fashion industry, second most polluting in the world, right? And we all partake in it, every single one of us. So I would love to hear from your perspective, you know, can we actually create materials? Can we actually design in a way that is earth-friendly and benign, in a way that on the front end it's not harsh on the people making it, and on the back end, if and when it does leak out of the system, it has, you know, a benign effect on the planet. So can you just kind of share a little bit? I mean, Lauren, you've been doing a lot of work in this space. Ellie, you've spent the last 2 years deep in this research. So as all kind of stakeholders in this, can you kind of share with us what your thoughts are about that?
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak for the whole industry, but I can definitely speak to my own opinion, my own experiences, and think as I started out with ideas and creating pieces and collections and art pieces, you know, you get the press, you get into the Times, you get into, you know, front of the New York Times, like, how amazing is this? This is going to change fashion. And then you realize that actually to commercialize that and to change a system that is so much bigger than one person is really, really difficult and takes a long time. But I think you can. But I think it's changing these days. So I think personally myself, I've seen most change when you get a power of people behind you. So similar industry, but within the beauty industry, I do all of this like stuff to try and like change the world and like, look at how amazing this thing is. And then I launched a video of just a color change hair dye, not gonna change anyone's life, right? But it got 80 million views overnight. So that then gave us a base of 80 million people who wanted this true newness within their industry. Now, we owned that newness, and then we had a power to take that newness to a big conglomerate and say, we want to do this, but we want to do it in a way that's non-toxic, that's not harmful to the environment, and that creates a brand new thing within the beauty industry that's never been done before. It's taken 5 years, but we've done it. But that was not without the weight of the audience around the world wanting that product. And I think it has to start with the artist and it has to start with the vision, but that's 1% of a journey. That's 99% of trying to get something to a commercial reality, which in this world economy will change the world, or having, you know, stuff out into the world can change the world. It's really difficult and it takes a lot of resilience. Yeah.
There's a famous British politician who died some years ago who used to say, if you want things to change, you need to give people hope and you need to get them angry.
Yeah.
And you need both of those things. And I think at the moment we've got a lot of anger and not so much hope. And I think what's exciting about the project that I'm working on at the moment is that we have been able to plan out, based on natural principles, what a truly circular, sustainable fashion industry could look like and a pathway to it. And one of our insights is that all of our man-made materials will inevitably leak. There is a fundamental law of physics that says we cannot prevent that. And if we try and keep our technical materials isolated, we will fail. They're going out into the environment. And so when you accept that reality, you also have to accept that synthetic materials like polyester are not the solution for the fashion industry. Recycled plastic, recycled polyester is not a solution. Unfortunately, at the moment, that's the industry's great best hope. And so you've got anger and recycled plastic as the best current solution. And so a lot of industries are saying, right, this is where we need to put our funding. And we are saying, no, we need to learn from nature. There's a great work by Rebecca Burgess of the Fibershed Institute, of Fibershed, showing that there are enough, we already have the resources we need to supply all the world's fashion from bio-based materials. We do not need polyester. And we are showing that in natural cycles, build up and manufacture is half the cycle, but just as important and necessary for the full cycle is decomposition. And so a very important part of the work that I'm doing now is bringing decomposition into the conversation. And we have discovered that there are decomposition technologies that already exist that will be able to handle the bio-based materials of the future, but can also take things like polyester and turn them into biocompatible, non-toxic materials that are useful for other manufacturing industries. And so we've got this wonderful story where we have a guiding star new system, and we have a pathway that we can already start on today to transition us to that new system. And we're finding that industry partners are very, very keen to talk to us because this is the hope, to go with the anger. And if we can get that message out there and get those proof points, publish the proof points that show that what we're saying can happen, then I think we really can make systems level, industry level, global industry level changes.
It's really frustrating because the people that can change the world, they won't adapt your technology unless it's cheaper than what they already have or performs better in another way. And what we've seen with innovation is often at the beginning of an innovation, it's not the perfect version of what it is. It doesn't mean it shouldn't exist in the world. And it can be more expensive and it can be more premium or whatever to test that audience. But it's often very difficult, like the valley of death from an innovation to an actual commercial product. Even these big brands like Nike, you know, they'll invest in a startup, in an innovation at a very small scale, and then they'll just bin it off. And it's such a waste. And I think we have to almost champion that we're going to fail, but it doesn't mean it shouldn't exist in the world because it will lead to something else. And backing these types of initiatives from day one shouldn't just come from governments and charities, it should come from big businesses too.
It is.
So when it comes to bio-based products, actually, that what all these companies are talking and, you know, aiming, and even biodegradable products. So I have a slightly bit different opinion regarding that. So when we talk about bio-based products, actually, some of the companies, some of us has been too greedy over the years. So one good example is millions of tons of lichens are extracted in Himalayan region, especially in high elevation, about 3,000 meters to 4,000 meters, where the ecosystem is super sensitive. So they're being used by very expensive cosmetic industry, perfumes, that big companies like Harris Tweed to color their clothing. So unless we understand the biological products, that it is a very expensive research process, but unless we understand where the science is and take correct measures to produce them synthetically and use them wisely in our industries, we are going to destroy most of these things that establish over million years within few decades.
Yeah,
That's
it's
right.
a big
That's
difference
right.
of learning from nature versus using
Yes.
nature.
Yes.
Yeah.
Using nature.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I really think when we talk about the bio-based economy, I can just see, like in a horror show, us getting all of our stuff now. We're getting all of our stuff from hydrocarbons, oil, all of our plastics, and all of our polymers, chains of carbon. Suddenly, instead of going to oil, we're going to go to soil to get all of our stuff.
Yes.
I'm not sure, or we're wildcrafting up in the for the lichens. For me, that paradigm is still asking Mother Nature to make our materials for us. What I think really we have to think about is, can we make our materials, which are basically long chains of carbon, out of something like carbon dioxide? A plant takes carbon dioxide and makes a long chain polymer. Hydrocarbons are photosynthesis from ancient plants a long time ago that made long chain polymers. There is a way that we can do chemistry to take carbon and put that carbon into polymers that will be biodegradable at the end of their life, durable while used. I watch this in self-assembly research, low temperature biomimetic chemistry, where we learn from those molecules and from those biosynthetic pathways how to do that using carbon dioxide, which is so abundant right now, to make materials. That soil should be for food. Food, not for trinkets.
Yeah.
So when we talk about this decomposition project and we take the polyesters and we find a way to decompose them by asking the natural world, there are critters in the natural world that are breaking down these materials now. We have to ask them, what's that chemistry? And they're breaking them down and they're making them into things that could be soil amendments, right? Get rid of that mountain of polyesters. But then when we go to bio-based, be very careful that we don't make that same overshoot mistake where we're making, chia pets and trinkets out of soil on farm fields. That's crazy. Let's use that for food. Materials I think we can make as well as, but we're only going to make it if we learn the chemistry set of nature. Right now we've got this industrial chemistry set, right? It's so different than nature's chemistry set. Nature uses a very small subset of the periodic table. Very small subset. The rest of nature. Very small subset. And then puts it together in very elegant ways to make all kinds of materials that are strong, that are stretchy, that are this, that are that, through design. I think that's nature's chemistry book is one we have to actually study. And we study that by asking these organisms that make these beautiful materials, how did you do that? And we have to learn how to do that. That's us becoming plant-like, because now our raw material is carbon dioxide. That's what I think. And maybe I'm way out there, but that's where, otherwise I think we're going to get into fields, you know, of grain, and instead it's going to be fields that are going to be turned into stuff.
Yeah.
Be careful there.
Well, I think this could go on
Yes.
for a long time. And
Sorry, I just kind of got revved up there.
No, I think it's great. But we have the splashing clock at us, so we do have to get off the stage. But I want to thank you all for, one, providing hope, and two, demonstrating what's possible, because we need to see that. So thank you all for leading this really important work in the world that we all need. So if you could please join me in thanking these fabulous women for the work that they're doing. Thank you.